The last rays of the September sun bled through the panoramic windows of Aurelia, painting the white linen tablecloths in hues of gold and rose. From her station near the service entrance, Anya Petrova watched the city lights of Manhattan begin to glitter, a sprawling galaxy laid out 37 floors below. To the patrons of this temple of gastronomy, she was just part of the scenery. A slender woman in a crisp black uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, efficient knot. She moved with an economy of motion that her manager, a perpetually flustered man named Gerard, praised as the pinnacle of professional service. He had no idea it was born, not in a finishing school, but in the muddy killing fields of forgotten conflicts. Anya cherished the anonymity. She loved the simple, tangible tasks, polishing a wine glass until it was invisible, memorizing the intricate components of the Coquille Saint-Jacques, the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly timed service. Here, the only threats were a spilled sauce or a demanding diner. It was a world away from her previous life, a life she had surgically excised from her soul, or so she tried to tell herself. In that other life, she wasn't Anya the waitress. She was Echo, the founder and former director of the Aegis Group, a private security and intelligence firm so discreet that most world leaders didn't even know it existed. Aegis wasn't a collection of hired guns. It was a ghost network of the world's most elite operators, analysts, and infiltrators, bound by a loyalty to her that transcended contracts and borders. She had walked away 3 years ago. A mission in Damascus had gone sideways. Not a failure in the tactical sense, the objective was secured, but a moral catastrophe that had cost the life of a young analyst, a brilliant boy named Leo who had seen her as a mentor. His face haunted her quiet moments, a constant reminder of the price of the power she wielded. So she had vanished. She dismantled her identity, created Anya Petrova, and sought refuge in the one place no one would ever think to look for a ghost. In plain sight, carrying trays of seared foie gras for the city's oblivious elite. Her second-in-command, a stoic ex-SAS soldier named Marcus Thorne, now ran Aegis. He had protested her departure vehemently, but ultimately he had respected her command. His one condition was that she wear the watch. It looked like a simple, elegant timepiece, a minimalist silver band with a dark, featureless face. But beneath its unassuming exterior was a multi-spectrum emergency transponder linked directly to the Aegis global network. A simple press was a check-in, a double press was a low-level alert. A long press of 3 seconds initiated Protocol Onyx. Marcus had called it her guardian angel. Anya called it a leash to a past she desperately wanted to escape. In 3 years, she had never used it for anything more than the daily automated check-in. Tonight, the restaurant was buzzing with a particular energy. The air, usually thick with the scent of truffle oil and quiet ambition, was charged with a more aggressive current. It emanated from the corner table, the one with the best view of the skyline, the Julian Croft table. Anya knew of him, of course. It was impossible not to. Croft, the tech billionaire wunderkind who had built a social media empire, Nexus, on a foundation of data harvesting and manufactured outrage. He was new money, loud, and notoriously volatile. His face was plastered on magazine covers, his exploits chronicled in gossip columns. He was known for his brilliance, but also for a casual cruelty, a delight in publicly demeaning those he considered beneath him. He arrived with an entourage of 3 slick, sycophantic young men in identical dark suits, and a woman who looked more like a showroom mannequin than a human being. From the moment he sat down, Croft treated the staff not as people, but as inconvenient pieces of furniture. He snapped his fingers for water. He sent back a bottle of Chateau Margaux, claiming it was corked, when Anya knew perfectly well it was not. He spoke in a voice pitched for the entire room to hear. His pronouncements on finance, politics, and art delivered with the unshakable certainty of a man who had never been told he was wrong. Anya handled his table with her usual placid efficiency, her face a mask of polite neutrality. Inside, however, the old instincts were stirring. She noted the exits, the sightlines, the way Croft's bodyguards were positioned. Amateurs, all of them, more for show than actual protection. She noticed the nervous tick in Croft's left eye, the way he constantly sought validation from his followers. He wasn't a lion, he was a scavenger, puffed up and posturing. Scavengers, she knew, could be the most dangerous. They were unpredictable, driven by a deep and gnawing insecurity. She just wanted to get through the evening, collect her tips, and go home to her small, quiet apartment in Queens. She had no idea that Julian Croft had already decided she would be the evening's entertainment. The evening wore on, a slow-building storm of arrogance and alcohol. Julian Croft held court, his voice slicing through the sophisticated murmur of Aurelia's dining room. He was trying to impress a potential investor at the next table, a quiet, older Japanese gentleman named Mr. Tanaka, who seemed more interested in his Dover soul than in Croft's boisterous monologue. Croft, unused to being ignored, grew louder, more performative. His gaze began to sweep the room, looking for a new focus, a new target to demonstrate his power. It landed on Anya. She was clearing the adjacent table, her movements fluid and silent. She was invisible, as she preferred to be. But Croft saw something in her quiet dignity that he interpreted as a challenge. It was the flaw in men like him. They couldn't stand to see someone at peace, especially someone they considered an inferior. "You," he barked, the word cracking like a whip. Anya paused, placing a dessert fork on her tray. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Yes, sir? What's your name?" "Anna, sir," she replied, using the anglicized version of her name, a small layer of her fabricated identity. "Anna," he repeated, savoring the sound. "Anna, you've been hovering around my table all night. Is there a problem? You find us fascinating?" His sycophants chuckled on cue. "I was clearing the next table, sir. My apologies if I disturbed you." Her voice was calm, level, betraying no emotion. This, too, seemed to infuriate him. He wanted a reaction. He wanted fear, or at least flustered deference. "The service here is supposed to be impeccable," Croft continued, leaning back in his chair and projecting his voice so Mr. Tanaka couldn't help but overhear. "And yet, my glass has been empty for," he dramatically checked his diamond-encrusted watch, "a full 93 seconds. Is that the standard at Aurelia? Or are you just incompetent?" Anya moved to the table without a word, picking up the bottle of Sancerre from its ice bucket. As she reached to pour, Croft subtly shifted his leg, nudging the base of the small table beside his chair where she had momentarily placed her tray. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but it was enough. The tray, laden with used cutlery and a half-empty water glass, tilted. Anya's reflexes, honed by years of life-or-death situations, were instantaneous. She caught the tray before it could fall, but a few drops of water sloshed from the glass onto the sleeve of Croft's custom-tailored Zegna suit. The room went silent. Croft looked down at the dark spots on his grey sleeve as if he'd been doused in acid. "You clumsy bitch," he hissed, his voice dropping to a low, venomous growl. The public-facing charm vanished, revealing the ugliness beneath. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? It's more than you make in a year. Probably 5 years. Gerard, the manager, scurried over, his face pale with panic. "Mr. Croft, I am so sorry. Please allow us to take care of the cleaning. The entire meal is, of course, on the house." Croft waved him away with a dismissive flick of his wrist, his eyes still locked on Anya. He was enjoying this, the power, the public spectacle, the fear in Gerard's eyes. He saw Mr. Tanaka watching now, and a cruel smile spread across his face. This was perfect. "It's not about the money, Gerard," Croft said, his voice rising again to its performative volume. "It's about the principle. It's about respect. It's about competence. Things this creature clearly knows nothing about." He stood up, a looming, imposing figure. Anya remained perfectly still, her tray held steady in her hands. She felt the familiar coldness creeping into her veins, the dangerous calm that preceded the storm. She was fighting it, clinging to the fragile peace she had built for herself. "I am Anna," she told herself. "I am a waitress. This is not my world anymore." "I want her to apologize," Croft declared. "Of course, sir," Gerard stammered, turning to Anya with pleading eyes. "Anna, please apologize to Mr. Croft." Anya met Gerard's gaze, then Croft's. "I apologize for the accident, sir," she said, her voice a flat monotone. Croft laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Oh, no, that's not good enough. That's not nearly good enough." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick money clip. He peeled off a stack of $100 bills, it must have been $10,000, and threw it on the floor between them. The bills scattered across the polished marble. "I want you to get on your knees," he said, his voice dripping with condescending glee. "Get on your knees, pick up my money, and apologize to my shoes. Maybe then I'll believe you're actually sorry." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the restaurant. His own friends looked uncomfortable. The mannequin-like woman stared at her plate. Even Mr. Tanaka had stopped eating, his face a stony mask. This had crossed a line from arrogance into pure sociopathic cruelty. Gerard looked like he was about to faint. "Mr. Croft, please, that's not necessary." "It is necessary," Croft roared. "I want to teach her a lesson. People like her need to learn their place." He turned his full attention back to Anya, his eyes glinting. "Well, what are you waiting for? It's 10 grand, a fortune for someone like you. Get on your knees." Anya looked down at the scattered bills. She looked at Julian Croft's smug, expectant face. She felt the last thread connecting her to Anna the waitress begin to fray. The ghost she had tried to bury was stirring, clawing its way back to the surface. Leo's face flashed in her mind, his bright, trusting smile. He had died because of the arrogance of a powerful man who saw others as pawns. She had sworn she would never let that happen again. She had tried to escape the world of powerful, cruel men, but it seemed that world had followed her here, to this quiet sanctuary of clinking glasses and overpriced food. And it was demanding a choice. Be Anna, the humiliated waitress, or be Echo, the woman who leveled kings. Her hand, steady as a surgeon's, rested on the table beside her. Her thumb brushed against the cold metal of the watch on her other wrist. The choice was made. The air in Aurelia crackled with a tension so thick it felt like a physical presence. Every eye was on the drama unfolding at the corner table. The sneering billionaire, the terrified manager, and the waitress, standing as still as a statue amidst the scattered $100 bills. Julian Croft's smile was wide and predatory. He had his audience, and he was reveling in the humiliation he was inflicting. He believed he was in complete control, the master of this universe he had bought and paid for. Anya's gaze lifted from the money on the floor. It met Croft's, and for the first time that evening he saw something in her eyes that wasn't deference or fear. It was a profound, unnerving emptiness, a void so cold it seemed to suck the warmth from the air around them. Her posture hadn't changed, but the energy she projected had shifted entirely. The meek waitress was gone. In her place stood something ancient and dangerous. "Is there a problem?" Croft taunted, his confidence wavering for just a fraction of a second. "Cat got your tongue. It's a simple transaction. Your dignity for $10,000. Seems like a fair trade to me." Anya didn't reply. Her left hand, hidden from Croft's view by her body, moved with deliberate slowness. Her thumb found the side of her watch. It wasn't a button, but a capacitive sensor integrated seamlessly into the bezel. She pressed and held, 1 second, 2 seconds. The watch gave a single haptic vibration against her skin, so subtle it was imperceptible to anyone else. 3 seconds. Protocol Onyx was engaged. For a moment nothing happened. Croft's smirk returned. "See? She's thinking it over. The price is right, after all." Then the world tilted on its axis. It started with a single tiny red dot that appeared in the center of Julian Croft's chest, right over his heart. He glanced down at it, annoyed. "What's this? One of your friends playing with a laser pointer?" he asked his entourage. Before they could answer, a second dot joined the first, then a third, and a fourth. In the space of 2 heartbeats, an entire constellation of brilliant crimson dots bloomed across his torso. They converged on his sternum from every conceivable angle, a deadly silent swarm. They came from the darkened windows of the skyscraper across the street. They came from the rooftop of the building adjacent. They came from a ventilation duct in the ceiling of the restaurant itself. A woman at a nearby table gasped, pointing a trembling finger. "Look." Croft looked down again. His chest was painted with what had to be dozens of laser sights, all trembling with lethal intent, all focused on a single kill-sized area. The blood drained from his face. His arrogant smirk dissolved into a mask of slack-jawed disbelief, which quickly curdled into pure primal terror. His bodyguards, who had been lounging with bored expressions, suddenly jolted upright, their hands flying towards their jackets before they froze, realizing the utter futility of their position. Who were they supposed to shoot? The sky, the ceiling, the entire city. The quiet, sophisticated hum of the restaurant had been replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. Diners were frozen in their seats, forks halfway to their mouths. Spoons clattered onto plates. The source of the lasers was invisible, unknown, which only amplified the terror. It was as if God himself had decided to pass judgment on Julian Croft. And then Anya spoke. Her voice was no longer the polite, neutral tone of a waitress. It was low, clear, and resonant with an authority that defied her uniform. It was a voice that had given commands that toppled governments and brokered peace in war zones. It was the voice of Echo. "There are 54 marks on you, Mr. Croft," she said, her tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. 47 are from external positions with clear lines of sight. They are using 338 Lapua Magnum rounds, which would have no trouble passing through the window, your body, and the wall behind you. 7 are internal. As she spoke, a man at the bar who had been nursing a scotch stood up, the lapel of his jacket falling open to reveal the glint of a holstered firearm and a discreet earpiece. The young couple by the window, who had been holding hands all evening, now sat apart, their eyes scanning the room with a professional, predatory focus. The sommelier, who had been discussing wine pairings with Mr. Tanaka, straightened up, his hand resting near the small of his back. They were all part of it. They were her people. Aegis. "The internal team is using subsonic ammunition," Anya continued, her cold gaze never leaving Croft's terrified eyes. "Quieter, less mess. Though at this point, I don't think mess is your primary concern." Croft's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving under the web of red light. His face had turned a ghastly shade of white. He looked like a man who had been laughing at a ghost story, only to have the ghost materialize in front of him. "You wanted me to get on my knees," Anya said, taking a deliberate step towards him. The scattered bills crunched under her sensible black shoe. "You wanted me to learn my place." She gestured around the room, a small, elegant sweep of her hand. "This is my place, Mr. Croft. The world is my place. You are just a guest in it, and you have been a very, very rude guest." The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been annihilated. He was no longer the billionaire predator, and she was no longer the humble waitress. He was a bug under a microscope, and she was the scientist holding the pin. The $10,000 on the floor seemed like a pathetic, insulting joke. In this new reality, all the money in the world couldn't buy him another second of life if she decided he didn't deserve it. Julian Croft stood frozen, a statue of terror adorned with the promise of imminent death. The 54 laser dots danced on his chest with every panicked breath he took. His world, once a playground governed by the absolute power of his wealth, had shrunk to the space between himself and the woman in the waitress uniform. He tried to process what was happening, but his mind, so adept at calculating market trends and exploiting digital weaknesses, was failing. This was an analog problem, a primal one. This was a predator revealing itself to be prey. "Who are you?" he finally managed to stammer, his voice a pathetic, reedy whisper. Anya circled him slowly, her movements as deliberate and graceful as a shark's. The Aegis operatives within the room moved with her, subtly shifting their positions to maintain control, their presence a silent, suffocating blanket of professionalism. The other diners remained motionless, trapped between fear and morbid fascination. "My name is not your concern," Anya said, her voice a chillingly calm counterpoint to the chaos she had unleashed. "What should concern you is that for the past 3 years, I have made a concerted effort to be no one. I have enjoyed the quiet, the simplicity. I found a certain peace in serving people, in performing a simple task well. You, Mr. Croft, in your infinite arrogance, have just destroyed that peace. And for that, there is a price." She stopped directly in front of him, so close she could smell the expensive cologne and the sour tang of his fear. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were scalpels, dissecting him with surgical precision. "You think your money makes you a king," she said. "You believe you're untouchable, that the rules don't apply to you. Let me tell you about your kingdom." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. I know that your company, Nexus, is currently under a clandestine federal investigation for securities fraud, specifically related to the inflation of user engagement metrics you reported last quarter. I know that you personally authorized the Phoenix algorithm, which illegally sells user data to foreign political action committees. The lead investigator is a man named Agent Miller. He takes his coffee with 2 sugars and is having an affair with a junior analyst on his team. Information, Mr. Croft, is the only real currency. Croft's eyes widened in shock. This was not public knowledge. This was a secret buried so deep within his organization that only 3 people were supposed to know about it. Anya continued, her voice relentless. I know about the offshore account in the Cayman Islands, account number 74B-91 Gamma, holding $172 million, funneled through a shell corporation called Croft Innovations. A neat little trick to avoid taxes. I also know the password to that account. It's Madeline 1998. The name of the family dog you had as a child, the one your father got rid of after it bit you. A rather sentimental choice for such a ruthless man. Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the foundations of his world. He wasn't just being threatened with physical violence, his entire empire, his very identity, was being systematically dismantled in front of him. I know that the self-made billionaire narrative you so carefully crafted is a lie, she went on, her eyes boring into his. Your seed money didn't come from a garage startup. It came from your maternal grandfather, a man you publicly disowned after you blackmailed him over his wartime activities. You built your house on a foundation of sand and secrets, Julian, and I am the storm. She straightened up, her voice returning to a volume the whole room could hear. You offered me $10,000 to kneel, a pittance. My fee for making a problem like you disappear is usually 8 figures. But this time, it's personal. You didn't just insult a waitress. You reminded me of what I am, and you woke up things that I had tried very hard to put to sleep. She raised her left wrist, tapping the face of her watch twice. The 54 red dots vanished as instantly as they had appeared. The sudden absence of the threat was somehow more terrifying than its presence. It was a demonstration of absolute control. Croft let out a choked sob and staggered backward, collapsing into his chair. He was a broken man. His face was slick with sweat, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. His entourage looked on, horrified and useless. His power, derived entirely from wealth and bluster, was a paper shield against a nuclear weapon. So here is what is going to happen, Anya stated, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. Gerard, the manager, who had been hiding behind a large potted fern, peeked out, listening with rapt attention. You are going to pay for everyone's meal in this restaurant tonight, Anya commanded, every single table. You will add a 50% gratuity for the entire staff. Then you are going to transfer 90% of the funds from your Cayman account to a charity. I suggest the National Coalition for the Homeless. My people will be monitoring the transfer. If it does not happen within the hour, they have instructions to leak the entirety of your company's fraudulent dealings, your tax evasion, and your personal history to every major news outlet and federal agency on the planet. By sunrise, Julian Croft will cease to exist. All that will be left is a cautionary tale. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. And finally, she said, leaning down one last time, you will get up from this table, you will walk out of this restaurant, and you will learn to treat every person you meet, from a janitor to a CEO, with a baseline of human decency. Because you will never know who they are. You will never know who might be listening. She turned her back on him then, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. She walked over to the dumbfounded Mr. Tanaka. My deepest apologies for the disruption to your meal, sir, she said, her voice once again that of a polite professional waitress. May I get you another glass of wine? Mr. Tanaka, who had watched the entire exchange with an unreadable expression, slowly broke into a wide, appreciative smile. No thank you, my dear, he said in perfect English. That was the best dinner theatre I have ever seen. Please, bring me the check. I insist on paying. He gave Anya a slight, respectful bow. In his eyes, she saw a flicker of understanding, the recognition of one power acknowledging another. The aftermath in Aurelia was surreal. Julian Croft, a man who had entered the restaurant like a conquering king, sat hunched in his chair, trembling and pale. His entourage avoided his gaze, their faces a mixture of fear and dawning contempt for their fallen leader. Without his power, he was just a pathetic, frightened man. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking so badly he could barely unlock it. Under the watchful eye of the man who had been sitting at the bar, he began the process of transferring a fortune. The other diners began to stir, whispering amongst themselves. They had just witnessed something impossible, a scene straight out of a spy thriller played out amidst their truffle risotto and Grand Cru. They looked at Anya with a new kind of awe and terror. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a myth, a force of nature in a black uniform. Anya, however, seemed unaffected. She retrieved her tray, calmly collected the soiled dishes from the table Croft had disturbed, and carried them back toward the kitchen, her movements as precise and unhurried as they had been at the start of her shift. She ignored the stares, the whispers, the palpable change in the atmosphere. To her, the job was not yet done. In the kitchen, the cacophony of clattering pans and shouting chefs had fallen silent. The entire kitchen staff, from the head chef to the dishwashers, had been watching through the service window. They parted for her like the Red Sea, their expressions of shock and respect comical on their sweat-sheened faces. Gerard intercepted her by the service door, his hands wringing the life out of a linen napkin. "Anna, I don't know what to say. What was that?" Anya placed her tray on the counter. She looked at Gerard, her eyes softening for the first time that night. He was a decent man, caught in a situation far beyond his comprehension. "It was a necessary correction, Gerard. Nothing more. A correction. Anna, there were lasers. Consider it a very aggressive form of customer feedback," she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. She began to untie her apron. "Gerard, I'm afraid I have to quit." "Quit? No, you can't," he sputtered. "You're the best waitress I've ever had. I'll give you a raise. You can be manager. You can own the place for all I care." She placed the folded apron on the counter. "My peace and quiet here is over. I can't stay. Thank you for the opportunity. You've been very kind." Before he could protest further, she pushed through the kitchen's back door into the cool night air of the service alley. The city's roar was a familiar comfort. She took a deep breath, the first truly relaxed breath she'd taken in hours. It was done. But the cost was high. Her sanctuary was gone. Her carefully constructed identity as Anna had been compromised. A sleek black Audi A8, impossibly clean for a New York City alley, pulled up beside her, its engine a near-silent hum. The passenger window glided down, revealing the craggy, familiar face of Marcus Thorne. He wasn't smiling. "Protocol Onyx Echo," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I thought the agreement was you'd use it if you were in mortal danger, not to discipline a rude diner." Anya leaned against the car door, feeling the exhaustion settle deep into her bones. "He called me a clumsy bitch, Marcus, and he threw money at my feet." Marcus allowed a slight quirk of his lips. "Well, when you put it that way, the council has been trying to get leverage on Croft for months. You just dismantled his entire offshore operation and neutered him in under 5 minutes. They're ecstatic. Also, Mr. Tanaka is an old client of ours. He was very impressed. He wants to double his retainer." "Wonderful," Anya said, her voice flat. "More work." "The world doesn't stop turning just because you want to pour wine for a living," Marcus said, his tone softening slightly. "You can't hide from who you are, Anya. You tried. You had a good run. But a shark can't pretend to be a goldfish for long. Eventually, someone taps on the glass." He was right, of course. She knew he was right. She had built Aegis to be a shield against men like Croft, a silent, unseen force that balanced the scales. She had left because of the collateral damage, the moral compromises. But tonight, she hadn't compromised. She had protected her own dignity, and in doing so, had delivered a perfect, precise dose of justice. Maybe, she thought, there was a way to wield that power without losing herself. Maybe the answer wasn't to run from it, but to control it more carefully. "Where to?" Marcus asked, his question hanging in the air. It wasn't just about a physical destination, it was about her future. Go back into hiding, try to build a new life as Brenda or Chloe. Or come home. Anya looked up at the sliver of sky visible between the towering buildings. The stars were invisible, washed out by the city's ambition. For 3 years, she had sought anonymity in the heart of the metropolis. She had found it, but it was a fragile piece. Tonight it had been shattered. But in its place, she felt something else. Not the dread she expected, but a flicker of purpose. "Take me to the headquarters," she said, her voice firm, clear, and full of a resolve she hadn't felt in years. "I want a full briefing on the Croft fallout, and I want to know everything we have on Agent Miller's love life. If we're going to hold the leash, I want to know exactly how tight it is." Marcus Thorne finally allowed himself a full smile. He leaned over and pushed open the passenger door. "Welcome back, Echo." Anya slid into the plush leather seat. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving Aurelia and the life of Anna, the waitress, behind in the alley. As they merged into the river of traffic, her watch vibrated once against her wrist. It wasn't an alert. It was a welcome message from the Aegis network. A system she had built, a family she had chosen. A past she could no longer run from, and a future she was finally ready to command. The weeks that followed the Aurelia incident, as it came to be known in the hushed, encrypted communications of the Aegis network, were a period of profound transition for Anya. Returning to the helm was not like slipping on a comfortable old coat. It was like recalibrating a complex and powerful weapon that she herself had designed. The headquarters, a nondescript brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, was a hive of quiet, controlled activity. Analysts with PhDs in geopolitical science murmured in hushed tones, their faces illuminated by the glow of data streams from around the globe. The muscle of the organization, men and women who moved with the lethal grace of apex predators, nodded to her in the halls with a reverence that made her slightly uncomfortable. She was their echo, their founder, their legend. To her, she was just Anya, a woman still figuring out how to reconcile the two halves of her existence. Her first order of business was Julian Croft. The fallout had been exactly as she had predicted. The 9-figure donation had been made, an anonymous gift that sent ripples through the philanthropic world. Croft's company, Nexus, issued a series of bafflingly humble press releases announcing new ethics protocols and a complete overhaul of its data privacy policies. Croft himself vanished from the public eye. The magazine covers were replaced by whispers and speculation. Had he had a breakdown, a spiritual awakening? The truth was far simpler. He was terrified. Aegis now owned him. His empire was a puppet, and Anya held the strings. He would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering if the person pouring his coffee or parking his car was one of her agents. It was a far more fitting punishment than a bullet. But dealing with Croft was the easy part. The harder part was looking in the mirror. She had left Aegis to escape the moral compromises, the cold calculus of sacrificing one life to save 100. Had she really changed? Or had she just been dormant? The incident with Croft had felt righteous, clean. But the world was rarely so black and white. Her first real test came a month later. A call from Marcus in the middle of the night. A situation was developing in a small, resource-rich nation in sub-Saharan Africa. A brutal warlord, General Joseph Okoro, was about to stage a coup backed by a shadowy multinational corporation that wanted the country's coltan reserves. The legitimate government was weak, and international intervention would be too slow and politically messy. Okoro was known for his barbarity. A successful coup would mean a bloodbath, with thousands of civilian casualties. "The client is a consortium of humanitarian groups," Marcus explained, his face a grim mask on her monitor. "They can't go through official channels. They want us to neutralize Okoro, quietly, permanently." This was it, the exact kind of mission that had driven her away. An extrajudicial killing, a precise assassination to prevent a wider slaughter. It was the cold, pragmatic math of her old life. Save 1,000 by killing one. But that one was still a human being, and she would be the one to sign his death warrant. Anya spent 2 days locked in the command center, staring at the data streams. She saw satellite photos of Okoro's compound. She read psychological profiles. She saw real-time intelligence feeds of his militia arming child soldiers. She saw projections from their top analysts, a 98% chance of mass atrocities if the coup succeeded. She remembered Leo, the young analyst who had died in Damascus. He had been a casualty of a similar calculation, an acceptable loss in service of a greater good. His death had felt anything but acceptable to her. She pulled up the schematics of Okoro's compound. The Aegis tactical team had already proposed a plan. A two-man sniper team, an insertion under the cover of a storm, a single shot, and an exfiltration before dawn. Clean, efficient, lethal. It was the classic Aegis solution. It was the solution she would have approved without a second thought 3 years ago. But she wasn't the same person. No, she said, her voice cutting through the silence of the command center. Marcus and the tactical lead turned to look at her, surprised. The strike plan is off, she declared. We're not going to kill him. We're going to break him. For the next 18 hours, Anya orchestrated a different kind of war. She didn't deploy snipers, she deployed information. Her cyber warfare division, the best in the world, launched a multi-pronged attack. They didn't just hack Okoro's bank accounts. They systematically rerouted his funds, not to Aegis, but to the very humanitarian groups that had hired them, sending him official-looking bank notifications for every charitable donation he was making. They flooded his communication lines not with jamming signals, but with deep-fake audio of his own commanders plotting to betray him, each one tailored to his specific paranoia. They hacked the payroll systems of the multinational corporation backing him, tripling the salaries of their executives while simultaneously sending termination notices to their field operatives in Africa. They created a digital ghost, a phantom rival warlord, and manufactured evidence that this new player was gaining the loyalty of Okoro's troops. The final piece was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. They found Okoro's estranged son, a university student living in London, who despised his father. They didn't threaten him. They offered him a chance to save his country. Anya spoke to the young man herself, not as Echo, the spy master, but as a woman who understood the burden of a bloody legacy. She convinced him. At the precise moment Okoro was meant to launch his coup, every screen in his compound, every phone, every television, every computer flickered to life. It was his son, speaking directly to him, not with threats, but with a quiet shaming plea, begging him to stop the madness, telling him his own men were ready to desert him for a leader who wasn't a monster. Simultaneously, every soldier in Okoro's army received a text message, a simple map showing the location of a UN refugee camp and the words amnesty, safety, food, choose. The coup imploded before it began. Okoro, besieged by phantom betrayals, a non-existent rival, and the public condemnation of his own son, had a complete mental breakdown. His army melted away, soldiers choosing the promise of food over a battle they were no longer sure they could win. The multinational corporation, facing financial chaos and the exposure of their illegal activities, withdrew all support. General Okoro was found the next morning, wandering the jungle in his pajamas, ranting about ghosts in his machines. He was taken into custody by government forces without a single shot being fired. In the Aegis command center, a quiet cheer went up from the analysts. Marcus looked at Anya, his expression one of pure admiration. No casualties. The objective secured. The client is stunned. They didn't think it was possible. Anya watched the feed of Okoro being led away, a broken and defeated man. She had neutralized him more completely than a bullet ever could have. She had not only prevented a war, she had done it with information, with psychology, with a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. She had found a third way. It wasn't about running from the power she held, nor was it about succumbing to its darkest temptations. It was about redefining it. She thought of the restaurant, of the simple pleasure of a perfectly executed service. Perhaps her new role wasn't so different. She was still serving, but now she wasn't just serving wine, she was serving justice. And she was doing it on her own terms. The quiet life of Anna the waitress was gone forever, but in its place Echo had been reborn not as an instrument of death, but as a guardian, a silent, watchful protector in a world that would never even know her name. 6 months later, Anya sat in a quiet tea garden in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. a place of serene, ordered beauty that felt a world away from the controlled chaos of the Aegis Command Center. Her new methodology, what Marcus had dryly nicknamed the Echo Doctrine, had become the agency's new gold standard: maximum psychological impact with minimum physical violence. They had become sculptors of reality, dismantling threats not with explosions, but with whispers, data, and precisely applied truth. A message had arrived that morning. It was an invitation to this very garden, sent through a defunct Cold War-era numerical channel that only a handful of people knew still existed. It was a ghost calling to a ghost. She had come alone. A man sat down opposite her, placing a simple go-board between them. It was Mr. Tanaka. He was not dressed in the expensive suit she remembered, but in a simple, elegant yukata. He smiled, the same knowing, appreciative smile she had seen in the restaurant. "I trust your return to your old life has been fruitful," he said, his voice as calm as the koi pond beside them. "It has been busy," Anya replied, her posture relaxed but every sense on high alert. "Our clients seem pleased with the new direction." "Ah, yes. The consortium of humanitarian groups," Tanaka said, placing a black stone on the board. "A necessary fiction. I am pleased. My associates are pleased." Anya's blood ran cold. She had vetted the client herself. The wire transfers, the encrypted communications, they were flawless. "You were the client," she stated. "It wasn't a question." "I was," he confirmed, his eyes twinkling. "General Okoro was a cancer, and you were the surgeon we wished to hire. But we needed to be certain of the surgeon's methods. We had heard she had retired. Lost her nerve, some said." He placed another stone. "We needed to know if the scalpel was still sharp, and more importantly, if the hand that held it had learned discretion and wisdom." The entire world seemed to shift under Anya's feet. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture far larger and more intricate than she could have imagined. "The restaurant," she whispered, the realization dawning on her. "Aurelia. That wasn't a coincidence." "Coincidence is the word the unimaginative use for design," Tanaka said gently. "We knew of Julian Croft's instability. His arrogance was a predictable variable. We knew he was seeking investors. I presented myself as one. We knew his patterns, his favorite restaurants. A few suggestions from a trusted concierge, a last-minute cancellation of his preferred table at another establishment. It was not difficult to place the wolf in the same room as the sleeping lioness." Anya stared at him, speechless. The fury, the humiliation, the life-altering choice she had made that night, it had all been a stage, a test. She wasn't a victim of circumstance. She had been a subject in an elaborate experiment. "You sat there and watched," she said, her voice tight with a dangerous calm. "You watched him humiliate me. You watched me risk exposing my entire life." "I did," Tanaka said, his expression unyielding, "and I saw what I had hoped to see. The old Echo would have had him killed. A quiet accident a week later. Messy. Uninspired. The frightened waitress Anna would have knelt. But you did neither. You used his own power, his own arrogance, against him. You did not destroy the man. You destroyed the monster inside the man. You taught him his place in the universe without firing a shot. That was the test, Anya Petrova, and you passed." The anger inside her warred with a grudging, profound respect. She had been played, but by a grandmaster. She looked down at the go-board. It wasn't just a game. It was a map of the world, of influence, of control. "Who are you?" she asked. "Not just a client. No client has this reach. My associates and I, we are like gardeners," Tanaka explained. "We do not own the garden, but we feel a responsibility for its well-being. We prune dangerous branches. We remove invasive weeds. Organizations like yours, like the CIA, like MI6, you are our tools, our shears, our spades. But sometimes the tools themselves become dangerous. Too sharp, too blunt. We exist to provide balance." He was telling her that there was a level of power above even her own, a hidden council that saw Aegis as just one piece on the board. The thought was both humbling and terrifying. "And now," Anya asked, "what do you want from me, from Aegis?" Before, you were a tool we could hire, Tanaka said, placing a final white stone that elegantly surrounded and captured a large group of her black ones. Now we wish to offer you a seat at the gardener's table, not as a tool but as a partner. Your new doctrine is precisely what this world needs, not more assassins, more artists of correction. He stood up, bowing slightly. The choice, as it was in the restaurant, is yours. You can continue to be a sword for hire, answering the call of the highest bidder, or you can help us tend the garden. He left the go-board on the table and walked away, disappearing into the curated beauty of the garden. Anya sat there for a long time, the quiet sounds of nature a stark contrast to the thunderous implications of his offer. She had run from her power, then reclaimed it, then reshaped it. Now she was being shown its true, breathtaking scale. Her world had not been the battlefield she thought it was. It was a garden, and it was in desperate need of tending. She reached out and placed a single black stone back on the board, not in a move of aggression, but one of balance. The game had changed, and she was ready to play.